When I just stopped caring about everything being perfect, it literally stopped being important. It stopped being a priority. And I'm thinking, gosh, how many holidays have I just ruined by making my family feel as though our house has to look like it isn't lived in order for it to be good enough to host the people that are supposed to love us for who we are and not what we provide them.
The banyan tree is a tree unlike others, a representation of resilience and strength through its ability to overcome the status quo and fulfill its purpose.
It knew that it was meant for something bigger and didn't allow the limits of other trees to confine its growth.
And our story looks similar. I'm Leslie.
And I'm Mindy. And our hope is that every one of our listeners learns to take up all the space they were created to, just like the banyan tree. Welcome back to the Banyan Effect podcast. I'm your co-host, Mindy, and today Leslie and I are talking about the unfiltered truth. So, as you know, if you spend any time on our podcast whatsoever, you know that vulnerability, honesty, and transparency is something that we are known for. However, there is a cost to honesty and vulnerability, and some of those are lessons that we are actively learning as we're putting ourselves out here on this podcast. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about some of the reasons why we believe in honesty and vulnerability and sort of why we have this mission to change the expectations around it. And then also some of the backlash that can come forward when you do live this very authentic, vulnerable, transparent life. And then also hopefully some tips on how to deal with some of that backlash that you may see and feel if you do start stepping out and being brave in the way that you live your life.
Yeah, I think we're having this conversation too because so many of us grew up in an environment where this was not talked about. I think a lot of our generation was raised, you kept your challenges secret, and we didn't open up a lot about a lot of things. I even think about things like mental health. Right now, most people go to a therapist, or a lot of people go to a therapist and are really open about that. And that wouldn't be anything that we had talked about as children growing up. So I think we're having now this discussion because we've been groomed for a really long time to keep quiet some of these things. And so now when people go against that and you do start to lean in and just be transparent and vulnerable for the sake of growing into yourself and helping other people, it's definitely met with it's almost like people are surprised to hear that because we're just not used to it.
Yeah, we're not used to it as far as how we were brought up, but then also obviously social media wasn't around when we were growing up. So the only way for people to share their feelings was in a group setting, and it just didn't happen. You showed up to a dinner party and you all talked about your highlight reel. Now we're dealing with how to utilize social media and how to connect with people through social media and not have it just be this filtered space where everybody's trying to look as perfect as possible. And also as parents now navigating, how does this look like as we are trying to grow into ourselves and we're trying to do all of this for ourselves, but then also bring our kids along. And so there is this illusion of perfection that I think are fighting. All the reels that are out there, it's so hard to keep up with the trends and the things that people are doing and everything that people are sharing on social media. And how do we fit in? And well, my marriage doesn't look like that. And my finances and my house and my, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you get stuck in this comparison trap. And then I think that that's kind of how it built as we're navigating this as a generation. And now it seems like everybody's at this place where they're like, I'm done. I'm sick of the filters. I'm taking them off. I'm done curating. I'm sure you remember 3 or 4 years ago or whatever it was, where everybody's goal for their Instagram feed was that it all the pictures had the same filter, and they were all you had to run everything through that app, whatever it was, so that, you know what I mean? So that they all looked bright and whatever. And it was exhausting. And so I think that really quickly, everyone kind of pivoted and was like, whoa. However, we're still, I think feeling this need to show up to social media as if everything is perfect. And so it's navigating that, like, how much is too much and how much is not enough, and how much is, like, are we faking it till we make it? And just social media, we didn't grow up with it. So it's this new thing that we're trying to navigate, as at the same time that we're trying to, like, we're in this midlife awakening and we're trying to step into who we were created to be.
Yeah.
It's very confusing.
It is confusing. And we've both become really passionate about showing up vulnerable and transparent, because we have seen the transformation in our own lives that it's been able to have. And then I think about our kids too, and this next generation. I feel really passionate about, like, starting to shift that idea now that you have to only be a highlight reel and you have to be perfect all the time. One, not only to inspire others, but again, to inspire this next generation, of recognizing that you can still love life and live this very fulfilled and happy life while not being perfect at the same time. Those two things can be happening parallel to each other. It's not like you have to wait to live and love life until a hard time is over. It can happen at the same time. And I think the only way that can happen is if we start to open up and be more transparent in what's happening in our everyday life. So we share this not just for us or for, I just want so badly everybody to feel this freedom that comes with authenticity and transparency and just being vulnerable. But we have to be real about what it means at the same time.
Well, and I think that also anybody that's inspired to do the same and follow some of those steps that we're taking to just lay some of it out there and stop pretending as if you don't have problems in your relationships or in your parenting or anything like that. But now that we've been doing that for a while, I think just helping to set up some expectations for what could come down the pike. And I wrote this down, that our why for vulnerability is to pave the way for others to open up and be honest about their struggles, because we know that it's the key to real connection, freedom, and healing. And I think that you and I, like, that's something that we have always bonded over and really felt strongly about. And it's so true. But again, we have both started to experience a little bit of pushback and some unexpected, I guess, negativity around some of our choices about the topics that we're opening up in areas that people just don't open up about. And I think that by doing that, it seems like people tend to view that as, like, if her issues about her marriage or finances are so big that she's talking about it publicly, that it must be like a real problem. And I don't actually think that my problems are any bigger necessarily than other people's problems. I've just been brave enough, you and I have been brave enough to start talking about them publicly. And that's going to bring about some questions. It's going to bring about some rumors potentially. And so I just think that understanding that there are these incredible, like you're saying, incredible benefits. Like, I think you and I could both give some examples of people in our lives, whether they were really close to us or mere acquaintances, that felt free enough to, like, reach out to us and open up about some secret, some skeleton, and, like, lay it down. And then they were free and we connected. And it's been like that. We have found time and time again that there has been so much beauty and amazing connection that's happened because of our vulnerability. But there is this other side of it that is a little surprising and just something to be aware of.
Yeah.
We still want to be coming from a place of encouragement that when you start to open up and be vulnerable, and if you're somebody who's not an oversharer, that is totally okay. But we also, through conversations that we've had with other people, we know that even if you are a very private person, my husband is a very private person, which is kind of funny because I'm the exact opposite. But as he and I have worked through struggles, even though he's a very private person, what he has realized is that when he does find the strength to open up and be honest with me and vulnerable with me or other people. He's taking these baby steps to be more open and honest with other people in his life as well. And the relief and the connection again, and just the sense of freedom is 100% worth, in my opinion. And I'm sure you would agree, it is worth all of the risk. But that risk is still there. And I think the other thing to just know is that there is a huge difference between being vulnerable, especially if we're talking about on social media, and using vulnerability. And I read this quote from Forbes magazine that says, using social media like a personal diary and treating acquaintances as if they were a therapist, however, can have serious consequences. And I can understand that. And I think that I would, there are some people that would probably argue that I am walking the line of oversharing in my life. And I think that that's something that, I'm also realizing that I need to be very careful about. I'm not worried about, we're going to talk later on about, some of the things that can manifest from doing this. And a lot of them don't bother me. But one area that I have come to realize that I need to be thoughtful about what I'm sharing is just that is around how it's going to affect those around me. And so if you're not somebody that's comfortable oversharing, but you want to take some baby steps into being vulnerable and making these connections through social media, I think that that's a good lens to look at it through is, are you using social media as a personal diary and maybe oversharing in some ways where what are you trying to get out of it? Are you being vulnerable to help free yourself and help connect with others and just not make sure that you're not living this fake life? I think that's a big part of why I share what I share, because especially right now, we live in this great big brand new house, and yet I know that we have some financial goals that are really important, and I just can't show up on anywhere right now as if we're living in this huge beautiful house with no downside and no struggles financially, because we are having some issues that we're working through. And so for me, it's just, I want to show up truthful, and I don't ever want somebody to look at me and think that it's anything but what it is. And so, but with that, there are matters in a family that need to be kept a little bit closer to the heart. And so I am one of those people that walks the line of oversharing. And so I think, again, if you are somebody like me who loves to share, just understanding the reason behind it.
Yeah, the intentionality behind it. We actually it's reminding me of a previous episode that we had where we talked about true human connection. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, we all want this true human connection. But we want that so much that we show up as someone who we think others want us to be. And so we dissected that in a previous episode. But what you're saying really reminds me of it, because it's like, if the intention is that true human connection that we all want, then it's coming from a very real and authentic place and is going to get you to where you want to go, which is to be a better, more real version of yourself. But if that vulnerability is coming from a place of wanting more attention, or it's not coming from that place of truly wanting to be a better person, then it's going to backfire on you. There's a quote from Brene Brown too that I really like, and it says, using vulnerability is not the same thing as being vulnerable. It's the opposite. It's armor. And that, I think, speaks directly to what I just said of using vulnerability to get attention isn't going to accomplish what you are really trying to do, which is create true connection, but you're using it as a way to get attention versus connection.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the difference there.
Yeah. And one of the things, again, that when we set out on day one to make this podcast, one of our missions was to change this concept that we all have to show up as if nothing is wrong. Like, and again, we've told this story on the podcast, but when you and I first came together, like the early on, we both were in positions where I'm like, I can't show up to a new friendship and pretend like I have my life together because I don't have the energy. I'm really struggling, and I just have to be able to show up with all my broken pieces if I'm going to embark on a new adult friendship. That's just all I've got right now. And thankfully we were both, I mean, it was serendipitous, of course, that like we were both in this situation where we were like, yeah, me either. I can't be in one more relationship right now where I am pretending like life is perfect, because that just feels like the world we're living in to some degree.
Yeah.
That is where we were coming from, is not only to gain that connection, because obviously it worked for you and I. We are very open and honest with each other about anything. I mean, I just showed up today and I was like, this sunny weather is making me really want to drink beer on my patio. Like, this is where I'm showing up right now. And, like we just couldn't have another relationship again where we were just pretending that we were anything but broken.
Yep.
And so that was our initial intention. And we have just seen so much growth and beauty out of that. But now we're kind of navigating some of those downsides. And some of those downsides are rumors and misinterpretations. And honestly, I just said something about our finances and I'm sitting here thinking, like, is that going to be misinterpreted? Like, I also don't want it to be misinterpreted that like we're in financial ruin and that we're going to foreclose on our house, because that's also not the truth. But I know now, after doing this for however many months that we have, that there are going to be rumors and there are going to be misinterpretations that happen when you open up. Because it's like when you go to the doctor and they ask you, how many beers a week do you have, or
Everybody
how many drinks
lies.
a week? And they times it by 3 or whatever. It's kind of like that. Like, but again, if I'm saying this on a podcast, it must be 3 times as bad, or at least, I have to expect that that's going to be to some degree the misinterpretation or where rumor. I talked about on the last podcast how we've heard from multiple different people that there's rumors going around in our community that Kevin and I are getting divorced. And it's like, well, I can't control that. And time will tell. I mean, people can keep talking about it. And there are thankfully some people that have approached him, which I just can't even say enough good things about those friends that actually have the guts to come up to him and say, hey, I heard this. Is it true? I just think that is so beautiful, because, that's not something that happens all that often. Anyways, I digress. So, rumors, I know that there's things being said amongst my family members about me, and misinterpretations and questions around my husband and I, or our finances or whatever. And to some degree, I've always been the black sheep in my family. So I think that I also have a little bit of tough skin around that. And also all the work that I have done with everything that's fallen apart in my life over the last year and a half, I have really learned so much about myself and what's important to me. And really, it's my opinion and my truth, and so much less about what other people are saying or thinking. But I think that has come from a year or 2 years of therapy and hard days and a lot of tears and a lot of growth. And so if you're somebody who hasn't had to do all of that growth and healing, and you start stepping into vulnerability, just know that it is going to take some development of some tough skin to be able to combat that.
Yeah. One of the questions that I know both of us have gotten asked since we started this podcast is like, how did you do it? Like, how did, not technically, how did you do it, but how did you break that barrier of just finally going for something that you've dreamt about? And our response, and as we, even trying to think about that, of like how to respond to these questions, is like, well, you just go, like, you just have to get started. And part of that is like having vulnerability of like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just going to get started. But the thing that kept us from getting started was this fear of this fear of like what other people were going to think and all of the things that could happen as a result of just leaning into finally leaning into something that you're really passionate about. So it's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like you have to just go for it and be vulnerable, knowing that there's a lot of freedom on the other side. It's going to come with the judgment along the way and opinions that you have to try to deflect and know, like, no, I'm going down my path right now. And as soon as you start down that path, it's like all of a sudden the opinions and the judgments against you don't impact you nearly as much as when you started. So I think it's just really interesting. Like you start working towards something that you're passionate about, whether that's a podcast or just being more vulnerable, creating real connections. And when you first start, there's an enormous amount of fear of all of the things that are going to happen as a result. And if you can just get past that initial fear and just start to lean into it, you immediately start to feel more connected to yourself and your own self-worth and your life. You start living a very real life. And it's like now the opinions, while you still have to deal with them and manage them, or like we said, we're kind of in that pivot right now, but they impact you significantly less than they did before. So it's like you just have to power through that initial wall and then you deal with it, but you're in a better place to deal with it because you have more self-worth in yourself. I think about a very small example. My house used to be immaculate all the time because if somebody were to stop by, I needed them to see a very picture perfect house. Now you walk into my house and there are dishes in the sink right now, and my floors probably need to be mopped, and there's some stuff on the kitchen island, and there's probably kids' clothes lying around because who knows why their underwear is in the kitchen. I don't know, but it happens. But it doesn't matter like it used to because I know that the people that are showing up, I feel so confident in myself and the things that I'm doing that it's like those opinions and judgments, like they really don't affect me the way that it used to. Like that part doesn't need to be important anymore because I'm my own person.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. My real estate coach, Neil, he has this quote that he recently shared, and I just love it. And he said, "Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so." And if you just like think about that for a second, nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. It's so true because I'm the same way. Like I used to freak out if I was having people over and like everything did not look like it was completely put in place and organized and together and everything. And we had a birthday party for my son a week ago. And we started setting up chairs for that party like 25 minutes before people came over. And I was like, wow, when I just stopped caring about everything being perfect, it literally stopped being important. It stopped being a priority. And I'm thinking, gosh, how many holidays have I just like ruined by making my family feel as though our house has to look like it isn't lived in order for it to be good enough to host the people that are supposed to love us for who we are and not what we provide them. Right?
Yes. Yes.
And so I think that's what happens. Like that's what happened with me and my house is like, I'm like, I stopped thinking that my house had to be this perfect way. And then it just went away. Like that need and desire and expectation that only I had on myself, it dissipated.
100%. That's exactly what we're talking about. Like the judgments can be small, maybe our house, but it could be as big as thinking about what's going to happen with your marriage. And I think we used to spend so much time, or it's really easy to spend time trying to then control that judgment or opinion. Like it's really important to me that I get that person who said that. It's important that I get that person to not think that about me. That doesn't matter. I've seen you navigate this over the last couple of weeks, and not once have you tried to figure out who did it or connect with them, to talk to them, to try to get it to change, or to try to show up pretending like it's perfect. Not once have you done that over the last couple of weeks. And it's because it does not matter. And you know in your heart that the things that you are sharing are for purpose and they're intentional. And it helps not only you be more real and true to yourself, but it's going to help other people too. And that is why we exist and why we share this message. So I think it's just such a perfect example of leaning into being real and vulnerable for a true purpose. And when it is true like that, all of a sudden those negative opinions or judgments, they don't matter. It doesn't even impact you.
Yeah, I have to actually give myself some kudos because I think 5 years ago, if I would have heard that somebody had spread a rumor or was spreading rumors that me and Kevin were getting divorced, I think that it would probably consume every thought of every minute of every day. And it really has not. And to some degree, it kind of makes me laugh and like, and then it's like, well, that's annoying and whatever. But ultimately, I'm like, well, I need to put my focus and my energy into my family and into continuing to improve my marriage and work really, really hard at my marriage so that those rumors don't end up becoming true. But I can't get distracted right now by the rumors. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I can't control them. And ultimately, they're either right or they're wrong, but I can't. I don't even know who these people are who are talking about or spreading rumors. So it's not like I can find them or whatever. And it doesn't matter. I think both of Kevin and I both, like, anytime, this has happened to us like 3 or 4 times in the last couple of months. And anytime it happens, he comes to me and he tells me, and I'm like, well, I'm still working on our marriage. I'm still in it. How about you? And he says, yes. And I'm like, okay, well, then that's all that we really need to know. If something changes on one party or the other, I promise you'll be the first to know.
Yeah.
but as of right now, I'm good, And so one of the things we wanted to talk about right today is the strategies for handling false accusations and navigating like gossip like that. And I don't know that I actually have a strategy other than to say that as long as you are living your truth and you have people, and that people can be one friend. I mean, sometimes that's what I feel like I have 3 or 4 friends around me, and that's the people that I have, and that's all I need anymore. As long as you have the people that are closest to you that know and understand where you're at, then you have to figure out how you can kind of let go of that other stuff and the opinions of the other people. Cause like I said, I mean, I know that my own family has things to say about me, and I'm like, well, again, I can't control that, and I'm not going to fight that battle anymore.
Yeah. I think the things that we have talked about too, I think if you find yourself in a situation where you're reacting to opinions and negative assumptions about your life, if you're in a place where you're reacting to it and you are spending your precious time trying to fix someone else's assumptions, I have certainly lived that life before. Mindy, I know that you have too. I was not in a place where I felt like I was living my true self. I had a lot of self-confidence, not a lot of self-worth. We've done episodes on that too. And so I feel like I want to tell people that are listening of if you're reacting in such a negative way to those assumptions and they are consuming you, to stop spending so much time trying to fix the assumption and instead turn inward and figure out, okay, I got to live a more real life and be more confident in who I am showing up as. Because when you do start to show up then more worthy of who you are and living your real life, it's like those assumptions don't impact you the way that they would had you not. So I think it's like, stop trying to fix it externally and turn inward.
Well, and you're going to start attracting people who want to see you succeed and want to root for you. I was actually talking with my husband about recording this episode, and he told me that he recently just read something that there are people out there that are going to be watching for you to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me of a quote. I think it's Taylor Swift's, but I don't really know, where it says your biggest fan is going to be a complete stranger and your biggest hater is going to be somebody you know. And I have absolutely found that to be true in my personal
Mm-hmm.
experience. And the thing about it is I think you just have to just be super aware of who you're letting in who you're giving access to yourself, especially when you are finally in a position where you're like, okay, I am stripping myself of all the fake, all of the things that don't actually serve me, don't represent who I am at my core. I'm going to play around. I'm going to get curious. I'm going to figure this out. And then you have to put up some walls around
Mm-hmm.
you and protect yourself from the people. And it very well could be, and probably will be, family that's going to show you the worst sides. And so just being willing and ready to also be able to say, you know what, if you're not interested in this version of me, and not interested in being in my life in a supportive way that's going to be cheering me on versus tearing me down, then I'm kind of out. And we've talked on several episodes about that. That's kind of where you and I are.
Yeah.
And my circle has shrunken. Is that a word? I don't know if that's a word. Shrunken.
Shrunk.
It's gotten smaller. My circle has gotten a lot smaller over the course of the last year or 2 years in all areas. And honestly, I've never felt more free and happier in my whole life. Not to say that there's not some sad moments, like that people that are not in my life anymore makes me, I have moments of sadness, but I also see what I have gained, and it's a trade-off, and it's one that I will take any day of the week.
Yeah. You said something about people rooting against you or rooting against you succeeding. And I'm going to be really honest right now. I have been that person in my past. I was so set on my worth showing through my accomplishments that I needed to accomplish more than anybody else. And I lived a life where, not that I was trying to intentionally pull people down, but it would make me sad to see other people succeeding more than me. And
mm-hmm.
and it wasn't until I leaned into, again, this concept of like, I'm going to be myself for the first time in my whole life. My worth is not my accomplishments. We go into all of the things that we have talked about. And now I am not even remotely close to that woman who needed to have more accomplishments than everybody else in order to feel good about my life. And so when you said that, I was like, I am guilty of being that person before. And I'm proud that I have taken the hard steps. And, I will probably have people listening to that and hear opinions and think things about myself, but it's like, it doesn't matter. I've really switched who I am as a person. It's like, it's so far from me anymore. It's weird to even say out loud.
Yeah. Well, and I think that we can all relate to that. And I don't think that it's because you're a terrible person. I think it's because that's how we have been set up. I mean, honestly, that's probably the entire intentionality of the creator of social media, is like to pit us all together. I mean, against each other, to try to always be hustling and pushing and trying to keep up with the Joneses and wanting up. And, again, I know you and I are exhausted of it. And I think more and more people are getting there. And one way to fight against that is just to start slowly stepping into vulnerability and transparency, and in an effort to connect with others, I think. And that connection is just, that can be done online. It can be done offline. It can be done to a friend, a family member, or a therapist. I mean, we've talked extensively about therapy. I think everybody needs therapy because we all have these tiny traumas throughout our lives that add up that we don't deal with. And it's just, it ends up, we end up in this ball of confusion, I think, at some point in our lives. And so again, I think cultivating authenticity for yourself can look very, very different from the way that we do it. But I think it's something that's worth considering for anybody.
My hope for everybody listening is that they have the courage to start to be more vulnerable in their life and transparent in their life and just true to themselves. We have both learned over the time frame that we've been more intentional about doing that the reward is immeasurable compared to the challenges that exist along the way. What makes me sad is that those challenges or the fear of judgment, the fear of people's opinions or negative assumptions keep us from leaning into that life. And so I hope that this episode, for anybody that is listening, was maybe the motivation to finally just lean in and start all of the things that we've talked about on this podcast today, because it is worth it. And you will be living a very free and happy life if you just let yourself get past that fear. Thank you for listening. If you found anything that impacted you enough today to share with a friend, please do so. It is the single-handedly the best way for us to grow. We appreciate you listening, and we'll see you here next time.
We hope you have enjoyed today's episode and found some valuable insights. If you liked what you heard, we'd love it if you would hit the subscribe button.
We love hearing from our listeners, so drop us a comment, share your thoughts on social, or review wherever you listen to podcasts. Your feedback keeps us going and helps us bring you the content you want to hear.
As always, we appreciate your time and company. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep listening to the Banyan Effect podcast.